like to call to order the hearing for the Hardwick Unified Development Bylaws update, 2025 proposed update. Thank you all for coming, appreciate it very much. This is what we're hoping for is to get feedback and comments and information two ways. So that is the purpose of this hearing, is to get information mostly from you to come this way, but if you have questions, we're happy to go your direction. I'm Dave Gross. I'm the chair of the Hardwick Planning Commission, and
Larry Fligelman, member of the Planning Commission.
Ken Davis.
I'm Cole. Jillian DeCherna.
and yes, she just snuck in. So we do have a PowerPoint that we're going to kind of go through and guide us through the different things. So, Kristen, do we want to start rolling that?
Yeah.
Is that how you want to do that? Okay.
Hold on, I want to make sure I go. Okay.
All right. So,
Too many things at once.
as I said before, the main purpose of this is to gather information primarily from you. And if you have any questions or comments that you don't want to present or doesn't occur to you now, you can send it to us. So we'll be gathering this and incorporating more. So don't worry about it if you didn't get a fully formed thought or something, later. Yeah,
May I make a request?
sure.
I don't know everyone's name, I apologize. If you are making a statement, if you could just preface with your name, please.
Yep.
At least at first. I think I can catch on, but that'll be easier for me.
And
I appreciate that.
hopefully everybody, thank you for the housekeeping. Hopefully everybody signed in with your contact information. Especially it will help if you have a question that Kristen can get to you specifically to send you information if you ask for it. The other point is Kristen will be taking notes, and so I tried to be a little bit courteous, though not enough, to try to slow down so that she can get the gist of it. And a lot of times Kristen will ask for clarification, so make sure that we record your thoughts accurately.
We are recording and
You okay? Good.
I do have backups.
Good. All right. So the big thing is comments from you and then suggestions on how we can improve this. That being said, some of this you'll see that is coming from the state. So we are constrained in working within a framework. And sometimes we'll say, yeah, that's beyond our control kind of a thing. So we'll try to inform you the things that we can control. So in 2024, we updated the bylaws. We do this on a regular basis as things change and work. Last year, the Home Act was passed by the Vermont legislature, and that was the act to create more housing. So we were already working on our bylaws to increase housing in Hardwick, and the Home Act came in, and we were already ahead of the game, but there were some more changes, modifications we had to make. And then obviously the FEMA floodplain regulations. So being 2025, we've continued our work. And first thing is we're going to do four main things. Create and integrate a village center zoning district for East Hardwick Village. So that's only specific to the village itself. Establish a river corridor overlay district. That is much like any other zoning district, but an overlay would actually cut across other zoning districts, if that makes sense. That's why we call it. Usually you're in a piece of properties in one district and not in any others, but the overlay would go across that. Then remove local Act 250 references. That goes back to, once again, the Vermont legislature, Act 181, where they revised Act 250, which was quite extensive, and that changes a lot of
our bylaws when they refer to Act 250. So we have to, because the bylaws are a legal document, we have to go through and make sure the language is appropriate for the new status of what Act 250 is in our relationship to it. And then update just definitions and cross-references. That's pretty much editing. For instance, we do not use households anymore. We use dwelling units so that it's easier to say. We don't say families type of thing. It's a dwelling unit. It's just new language. It's a little bit more encompassing. Okay. So that being said, we're going to start with the Village Center zoning district. Right now, East Hardwick has two districts, a central business district, which pretty much runs up and down Main Street, and then everything else is in the village is compact residential. And when the central business is also downtown Hardwick Village. So when we were updating the 2024 bylaws for basically the Home Act, we were getting kind of in a bind that if we were trying to make a change that was appropriate for the central business district for downtown Hardwick Village, it didn't make sense in East Hardwick Village. And vice versa, it was very obvious if we wanted to make changes in East Hardwick Village in the central business district, it wouldn't make sense for Hardwick Village. So we had a consultant help us with that, Heather Carrington, and she said, tell you what, let's keep East Hardwick separate. And we did not update any thing for East Hardwick, but her recommendation was that we develop a village center district, which would only be for East Hardwick. And the advantage to that is we could craft the bylaws specifically what's best and made sense for East Hardwick, and we wouldn't affect Hardwick Village and vice versa. So that's the reason for that. So now we're at that point that we need to go through the process to make those bylaws official. Okay, that's kind of the long ways how we got here. So we do have the purpose specifically for the village center. And the purpose is to support a central mixed-use area in East Hardwick. The village center district is intended to provide a place of civic pride and focal point for development in the community. The village center district enables a variety of housing opportunities with a mix of small-scale, commercial, in a pedestrian-friendly setting. So the whole idea is to keep it as a kind of a small village, much like it is now. In that area. So here's a map, and for those of you that are familiar with East Hardwick, it is School Street, Pleasant Street, Main Street, a portion of Cedar Street, and then going across the river we have East Church Street, Stevens Lane, and going up Brickhouse Lane up to Summer Sweet Gardens, and does not include the section along 16. Originally, we were thinking of including it, but the feedback from the property owners and businesses along 16, they wanted a more commercial-friendly development for highway mixed use, and that's
Which is
why
their current district.
which is their current one. And that's why that is excluded from that, if that map makes sense. Any questions on the maps or the area that this new, yes?
So Mike Moeller's property wouldn't be in the commercial use anymore?
It isn't in there.
It wasn't originally
never
either,
been.
really?
Right.
You could request it.
Okay.
I haven't had any requests. I
Okay.
haven't had any requests. I
Okay.
tried to work with what people asked.
Okay.
And
But that can be switched?
that could be amended if someone
Okay.
wanted
Yeah.
to come and talk to us, yes.
And that's the other side is, once these districts are formed, they're not set in stone forever, but we would have to go through the process, which we're doing now, of changing it. We did that out on Route 14 and 15, the intersection where we were trying to, and coming into town, where we're trying to align what existed on the ground that would make sense. And they're basically, the structures and businesses weren't in the right district, so we shifted the lines and made adjustments. So going forward on that, if there aren't any other questions. So part of this was generated out of the grant for a better connection study, which was a 18-month study basically of going through and getting information that had already been gathered by other studies and organizations about East Hardwick, and then bringing the community of East Hardwick together and blending it with a consultant and running through what do you want basically for the village? What do you want the village to be, and where do you want it to go? And so the Better Connections report is available on our website that goes through the process a little bit more detail. But these bylaws are to assist in implementing the recommendations in that plan, if that makes sense. Okay? And so the main thing is that we, like any district, it goes through the minimum lot size, frontage on the road, setbacks, and the height, the maximum height of the structure. So 35 feet is pretty standard as far as the height. We did change some of these from central business and compact residential. So there are some changes. Now, that doesn't change anything as it stands now, but if somebody wants to come in and put a new structure in, then they have to go by the new setbacks. And the idea is by reducing them, they make it a lot easier on the small lots, especially along Main Street, to put in additional structures or an addition. One of the other things to do is, to note, is that we're looking at what existed on the ground. So a lot of the compact residential, let's just say, bylaws made no sense. The structures, it was when they went through and did the zoning, the existing structures are technically in violation. If somebody wanted to build exactly what was right next door to them, and which is allowed, they would not have been allowed to, if that makes sense, because the rules didn't match what was on the ground. So these dimensions, we tried to adjust them so that they made the most sense to what existed, if that makes sense. Okay. And by the way, I know I'm talking a lot, but if anybody wants to jump in, okay, that's my job. Yeah. Thanks for the support, guys.
You're doing great.
Okay. So, in the bylaws, going down, they'll have two lists of permitted uses and conditional uses in any district. And permitted uses basically says you require a permit from the zoning office, meaning Kristen, and she'll walk you through what you need or whether you need one. But you don't have to go beyond Kristen. So it's a pretty simple, come on in, she'll say, no problem, this is what you need, here's your permit, and you're good to go. And so these are, another way to think of these are things you're permitted to do without too much fuss or bother, other than going and running through the zoning office. So as you can see, they're pretty standard, once again, dwelling unit, single unit, you can think of home, type of a thing. 2 units, multi-unit. And obviously accessory dwellings, which are the new allowance we will have, because we are trying to encourage, if you want to think of converting your garage or converting your addition that you don't use, or bringing in a tiny home or something like that. That's what, the accessory dwelling idea is. Then obviously, pretty much common things.
Are you not done for a minute?
Well, go ahead.
I can,
No, keep going. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. So anyways, these are pretty straightforward. The other ones. And then conditional uses, those are things that have a greater impact on your neighbors, is the way to think about it. So what that does require is you're still coming into the zoning office, but eventually once Kristen kind of walks you through the process, you're going to have to lay out your plans to the Development Review Board, which will meet, and they will go through and take a look at what your idea is. And they might just say, yeah, looks good, or they might come in and say, well, you're going to need to have another light over here or something. Or Kristen's saying they never do that, but that's kind of the thing they could ask. You're going to have to plant a cherry tree there. I mean, that's the thing they'll have a good reason, but they would come in and tweak your plan somewhat, or they would say you're going to have to shift it right or left or rotate it or something, but it would be basically based upon the comments, and there would be in a hearing their neighbors or whatnot, and they would basically tweak your plan if necessary to make sure it abides by all the bylaws and accommodates your neighbors in the community, if that makes sense. Yeah.
interject?
Sure.
Typically, if it's a conditional use, and it's going to the Development Review Board, there are other permits that are going to be needed from the state, like stormwater, wastewater, etc. And those typically will inform more of the plan.
Right.
So,
One thing they might say is if you've got a business, it would be hours operation type of thing, something like that, So, and you look down here, it's pretty obvious, like if you had trying to find something, agricultural forest processing, and it went in, well, obviously, there would be a question about how much noise it will make and when you're going to make it. It's not a problem if you have some noise and activity during the day, but 3 a.m, your neighbors might have concerns, that kind of a thing, if that makes sense. Okay.
that's the last slide.
That's the last one on,
Do you want
yeah,
to,
I think we do, I have to say we pause.
if there's any
Yep. I think it's good. So, any questions on the village center district we're proposing, or comments or observations that you want to share? Okay, that's good. So, the river corridor overlay. So, what is a river corridor? I like to keep this is the official definition, but I like to think it as rivers move around, and the state will go and say, this is the area where we're going to let the river move back and forth in the future, or we'd expect it to move back and forth in the future, and therefore we're going to try to have our development in that area with the expectation that someday the river might come marching this way, if that makes sense. So it's kind of the wiggle room for the river. Even though the river's over there, it might be over here later, and that's what they do. And as you can see on this example, with the different lines, the river corridor is outlined, but you can see that even over the past few years, the channel has migrated. And that's a perfectly normal process for rivers. They erode in the cut bank, and they come off the slip bank, and you get the nice meanders. And then they'll cut off a meander. and jump channels and whatnot. So basically, river corridor includes the river channel and the surrounding land, which someday the river might come visit, is the way to think of it. So we have to plan development in that area with that future expectation, if that makes sense. Sure. Any questions on river corridor, since that's kind of the key thing that we're talking about?
Just the definition, the concept of them.
Everybody comfortable? Good. All right. So basically, Act 121, I think that was passed in 24, yeah. And so this is they're going to regulate the river corridor overlay throughout the entire state, and they're going to phase it in. Now, the interesting thing is we're trying to be ahead of this. What are all the rules? We're not really sure. But it is being built, but it's not going to happen tomorrow. It is going to be phased in. But the obvious thing is the state will have control over it. They'll have control of what is the river corridor, and they'll have control over what occurs within it. So the idea is right now, if we adopt the river corridor rules now, it helps give us some control over the permitting process. If we didn't do this, one of the things is then it's whatever the state says type of a thing. And the early adoption will give residents time to, just like you're coming now, kind of understand what this is all about. If we weren't going to adopt this, it would have been kind of up to everybody to research it on their own, if that makes sense. But having it early, we can explain what the proposals are and what we're looking at, of what we know. Not all of them have been written yet. And this is the key portion, the higher level of state reimbursement, which kind of gets glossed over, like, why is this going on? The state basically has a little bit of carrot and stick. The stick portion is you have to do this because it makes sense, and we can't have it hodgepodge, if you will, on the river. It's all going to be by state for consistency. The carrot is for disasters, any disaster, but specifically we're all concerned about flooding, and that would be the key one here, especially based on our past couple years' experience. So if you have a flood and the federal government declares it a disaster area, then federal funds go to the state. And just for every $1 million, let's just say, of damage, the state says, the feds say, yes, you had $1 million worth of damage in Hardwick. They will send 75% or $750,000 to the state to help us repair and address it. That leaves $250,000 for the state and the town of Hardwick to make up the difference to fix the remaining damage or address the state. If we had nothing, the state would come in of that 25% that's there. They would kick in 7.5%, and we'd be on the hook for 17.5%, roughly $200,000 roughly. Because we already have emergency management plans, we already have bylaws, we already have a lot of things in place, we are dropped down to a 50-50 split where the state would pay 12.5% and we pay 12.5% of that damage cost. If we adopt the overlay, our share goes down to 7.5%, which is about $50,000 and per million. And the state share would go up to 17.5%. So it is what we've already done has already reduced significantly the tax burden on the town of Hardwick for flood damage. And this would basically reduce our, what we're still on the hook for, from 12.5% to 7.5% of that $1 million, or whatever the
Of the
total.
non-federal part of the $1 million.
Well, the entire amount.
Oh, right, the 7%
Yeah,
is the entire.
Yeah,
Sorry.
the state of Vermont is out for 25%. So that is one of the key drivers on this, why everybody's saying, okay, it is for safety, it's for environment, it's to help businesses and protect your homes and life. But it is also to maximize what kind of support we get from the federal government and the state government, if that makes sense. So that's the one, besides the safety, environmental issue, it is a financial issue also. Any questions on that? Because sometimes yeah, go ahead.
Ivan Bernard. I guess my question is, based on what you just said, back in your percentages, I'm just wondering, in the last flood, what is the amount of matching funds that Hardwick paid out
For which,
this last flood?
may,
24?
Yeah. it's
20, so, may I?
Yes,
Okay,
please.
so 23 was very unusual. The state matched everything. We don't have a match from us in 23. It was, the state stepped up and said, we're gonna do the 25%.
So we spent nothing?
Right,
Right.
exactly.
2024.
2024, we're now looking at, and we are that 12.5. It has not hit us yet.
How much is that estimated to be though, dollars?
So one bridge could be 2.5 million. So that's,
So we don't have an estimate of
12%,
damages?
don't.
2.5 million.
we don't. So this is yet another tool in the, as we looked at everything going forward. Because,
May I jump in for a second?
yes,
Some of the details that are being shared that I definitely want to hear, some numbers and things, it's hard to hear. So I think I'm not sure who's speaking, but someone who just started speaking. Is it possible to speak louder and more clearly, please?
Sure, how about if we repeat the question as our understanding, which helps us make sure that we're understanding what you're asking, and then you can hear us, if that makes sense. Kristen, do you need a mic?
Sure.
I don't have a mic.
No, I can.
But that's for the HCTV. Is this better?
Yes.
Okay.
Torn language, that's-
Well, those are HCTV mics. We've got two different miking systems going on. We have the Zoom call and 2023 was unusual. It was matched 100%. We are now looking to the next phases, which is 2024, and that is not currently matched. The state may step in and say, we're going to match, but we're trying to look at each piece to see, to put ourselves in the best position. That's why this started, this was brought up. This was one of the first things we thought of. It's one of our last pieces.
So how much was 2023 that the state ended up paying for?
I don't know. That would be a question. We've divided.
Okay.
David has done the FEMA work. I've done the mitigation work. Nothing has come out of the town for the mitigation work. It's all been 100%. Everything I've pursued is 100%.
But we don't have a dollar amount.
No, I mean, at one point I had like 7 million that came in. I don't know where we're at right now. We just brought in another 2 million. And those are ongoing projects, and they're projects that will protect different parts of town. They're for different aspects. But as far as like a bridge, a $2.5 million bridge, if we have to match the full amount, it's going to be $100,000 more. So that's one of the reasons to look at this.
To answer, I don't need an amount, but right now we're sitting at best case, a 12% matching, 12.5% matching funds if I
Yeah.
actually, okay.
Yes.
And whoever that is, I hope they're heard me, just trying to track with it, okay?
Yeah, we have, there's 5 different elements that a town can do. We've done 4. We've tried to do everything we can. The last one standing is this one.
And it takes us down to 7.5%, which is the lowest.
That's
Unless the
that's
state-
Best case, if the state adopts it, it wouldn't be
It's,
better.
No.
Let's hope that we don't
No,
have
they-
another 23 where they just say it's so bad, we'll pay for all of it.
No, even the state is going to roll something out. They're working on it right now. It's one of the things that I've been asked to give input on from my position here, what I've seen. They are really trying not to make it too onerous for people, but it will be getting a permit from the state. And if you've had to get a permit from the state, it can take some time. They are going to give towns with a certain threshold of rules the ability to do their own. At this point, they have said that the rules we've presented meet that threshold, but they don't, and it's required that they give the permission to the towns to do their own permitting with certain, like, as long as they have certain types of rules. The match is a separate thing and is going to continue for towns that are doing their own river corridor. If you are, let's say, Craftsbury, you're in the town of Craftsbury, you don't have zoning, the state introduces the river corridor rules, you now have river corridor rules, you're not eligible for that next level because you didn't incorporate the rules yourself. So you're not doing the work that the state wants you to do. It's one of these, it's carrot and stick, but it's 2 different groupings of rules.
And it's going to be mandatory within 3 to 4 years?
January 1st, 2027, and they are working on them right now. The consultant has already started.
It's already passed everybody, the state and senate,
State,
everybody.
yep, Act 121. Yep. And even towns without zoning are going to have this. And that's why they did it, because they had such a difference in zoning between different towns that they really felt this was important enough to put forth for the entire state.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions so far? Because as you can tell, there's a lot of nuance and complexity to it. So
Are we on the next one?
we just finished the higher level of state enforcement. Yeah, you're there. Okay. So once again, an overlay goes across pre-existing zoning districts. That's the name. So you would be, and we'll just say highway mixed use. Well, you have to follow all those rules, and then if the overlay goes over you, you also have to follow those rules for the, which would be probably more restrictive of what you could do because you're to the river. So the big thing is they're working on reducing the flood and erosion risks because whatever you do in the river corridor has consequences both upstream and downstream. Obviously, the most obvious thing is if you build a huge building, big box store right down there, it's going to change how the river flows, it's going to do all kinds of stuff. And if that box store gets knocked down, then you have debris going down. So they're trying to take that out. Protect water quality. The nice thing is as we are careful about the development we're doing and moving out of that, the river becomes much more natural. You get much better habitat, if you will, for wildlife and whatnot, and plants. And when it does flood, it improves the water quality. Plus, water flowing in across it has a lot of chance to have sediments trapped in the boggy areas, if you want to think of that. So it improves the quality of your actual rivers and streams. And supports the natural movement of rivers over time. You know, the rivers, especially during major floods, are going to go where they're going to go. It's all physics. And you can sometimes engineer and try to tweak it a bit, but if it's a big enough flood, and it runs long enough, the river's gonna be over there, regardless of the best efforts anybody tries to do to contain it. And this is key, the overlay only applies to areas mapped by the Vermont Agency of Natural Resources. Kristen is not going to have any control where that line goes. However, if something doesn't make sense, there's obviously a negotiation where we can say, that elevation doesn't make sense. That's not what's really on the ground, and the state is not trying to be arbitrary. They're trying to get the best match for where the river corridor is, and making it the first time needs to be tweaked or moved. That obviously is a process.
So, may I?
Yeah, sure.
The state of Vermont recognizes that there are issues, there are parts of our river corridor, especially in our downtown area. There was a woman here, Lynn, I don't know if Lynn's still there.
Back here.
Hi, Lynn. Your house is mapped as being in the river corridor, and that's not really realistic. By proposing this overlay, I was able to request new mapping. There is an individual from the state working on improving our mapping. So whether or not this overlay goes through, we're going to have better mapping. And that's a bonus for all of us, because even if the response is that we don't want to see this go forward, when the state comes in later, you won't be in that mapping because we've been able to ask for it to be improved. So that is happening right now. So I've identified, I think, most of the places where there's a disconnect. If you think there's a disconnect at your home or your property, and send me an email, give me a call, talk to me after this meeting. Happy to tell you if I've already identified it or if I can help add that to the process. Is that fair? Yours is already in there, Lynn. Your house is
I have
there.
a question.
Yes.
Go
I
ahead.
don't know if it's provided, but I'm curious if there is a list of addresses that are impacted, that are already identified as being in, within the overlay.
I don't have a list. Everyone who got a mailing about this is in. I pulled there's no way to do an actual list.
Okay.
I had to do it manually.
And just speaking for the group, it doesn't look like anyone's monitoring the chat. And there was some notes about still having difficulty hearing clearly some of this pertinent information.
I think the problem is we're having a hard time seeing the chat, but thank you for sharing that. And we'll try to use what we used to refer to as our teachers' voices, which project a little bit more.
Hi, this is Helena Carlton. I'm in the overlay, and the problem hearing is when more than one person is speaking at a time. It's very hard to hear what's actually being said because it's garbled.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll try to not have the ongoing cocktail conversations. We'll try to have one person speak and then another.
Is there going to be a printout from this recorded? Because even the recording's horrible. I mean, I know it's being recorded, but I can't understand what's being recorded.
Right now, it's being also recorded by HCTV. So if you wanted to watch on there, they have a lot better sound man. And right now, I'm looking right at him, and he's looking at me, and he's adjusting the levels. So they'll probably have a much better record.
Well, hopefully, because we're being kind. It's
Okay.
very hard to do.
All right. We'll try to, I said it before, but we'll try to repeat some of the comments that are coming from the audience, if that helps.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you for the information.
I have
Technology.
another question.
Go ahead.
it may get covered, but is there an analysis or precedent for any other areas in Vermont where the overlay distinction has impacted property value?
I would say,
Being a flood zone?
so I would say on the question whether the overlay has impacted property values, it is brand new and it is only coming in right now. So I would say since it would be too early to tell, I guess would be, and I don't know of any study or prediction. Oh, we have an audience member who has an anecdotal report. Okay.
The river corridor easement started in 2008. We have, yeah, how is it not the same thing? It still affects properties the same way.
Okay.
Sounds to
There,
me like this
the
hearing-
point is right now.
This year you asked for our input, but it
Yeah,
sounds
no,
like
no,
you
no.
don't want it.
No. This is
all the answers over there.
The river corridor is separate.
One person needs to speak at a time, though.
All right.
I'm gonna manage some
Right.
expectations here. You should
So-
have been at the meeting then.
Right. So the question is that the new flood regulations in relation to it that has been developed over time, not specific to the corridor right now, but earlier ones already had an impact and had changes rules, and that did have an effect on property values. And I think that's it. The point was being made that those are existing flood regulations that we have in place, and they're separate from the river corridor ones that are going forward. So that was the discussion. To answer the question that was asked, what was the effect, and has there been a study been done? And I don't know if there has been a statewide assessment or estimation, but I would, I guess, look to some of the testimony as the laws were being developed. The legislature probably had people putting in information. So if there was such a study, it probably would have been presented there, is my best guess.
Thank you.
You bet. Okay, sorry about that, guys. Technology is fun and we all love it. So right now, just to go through, going back from once again, the information that was presented to the legislature when they were considering Act 121, the last statement there, 70 to 80% of all flood-related damages occur within Vermont's river corridors as they're being laid out now. So it is the major area where damage, read money, is occurs, as opposed to other areas of the floodplain, which might get their feet wet, but there won't be a case of perhaps of like the inn by the river that literally became the inn in the river. Sorry, it's all true, and sometimes you have to kind of laugh about tragedies. But all right. So, any other questions before we go on that? We do not want to rush you. Okay. How the overlay works allows normal use of properties with guardrails for safety. So, your day-to-day living in the space, unless you are making changes to your property, will continue. It exempts agricultural and forestry uses because that's pretty much standing policy for the state of Vermont. Agriculture is exempt from our municipal bylaws. So we have an overlay, but if you're a farmer or agriculture related, you are governed by the Department of Ag. Directs new structures away from places where the river is most likely to move. So if you're going to, somebody's coming in, especially somebody who's not familiar with the area or not familiar with rivers or wasn't paying attention all the time in earth science class. I'm an old science teacher. That they may not recognize the hazard of placing their house, which has got this perfect view and is very convenient. And obviously these rules and regs would help notify them like, that's a really bad idea for these reasons. And you need to position your structure someplace else on your property where it's safe. Reduces erosion and channel migration damage. We talked about that. If you have a structure and the river hits it, it can, jam up the downstream channel, and the river during a flood obviously then would start carving a new channel in an area that would take decades to migrate. It would instead occur just in a few days. Helps the town unlock funding, and we talked about that. Also, funding is when grants come through, and we have other projects. A lot of the changes we've made to our bylaws and studies we have made, we have incorporated and cited when we've gone out for grants for studies and development, and that helps us win those grants. One example being the Better Connections grant in East Hardwick, going back and showing all the previous studies that already been done, because these grants are competitive, help move us to say, yeah, you guys already have done a lot of the groundwork. We will pay for the consultants to come together and help you develop this plan. So everything we do often helps makes us gain points or look better when we go out for other grants. Okay, what is allowed and what changes? So basically, projects that may require review, new buildings, that's obvious, additions or expansions towards the water, significant grading or filling towards the water, major changes to existing structures towards the water, routine maintenance, small projects, and normal agriculture uses, basically not a problem. Unlike the floodplain, no interior permits are required. This is mostly about the structure and acting as a block or an obstacle to the river's migration. What goes on inside really doesn't matter.
Could you please add that last bullet point a little bit more?
Sure. The
For floodplain, is interior permits are required, but for the overlay, they're not?
yeah, no interior. The idea of the river corridor is what they're mostly concerned is with the structures themselves or the fill themselves. It's more about the physicality of it and how the river interacts with that structure or the fill. Whether you have a dance hall inside that structure, or it's a yoga studio, or it's your residence, the structure itself, the river doesn't know what's going on is a way to think about it and doesn't care. The physics of the river are going to be the same. So the only thing it would be is if you had a restaurant that required a parking lot, well, it'd be the physical structure of the parking lot outside, not the fact that you had a restaurant inside, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
At least that's my understanding, and I haven't got a pen thrown at me yet, so I think I'm okay. Okay, so that pretty much goes through the river corridor overlay, what we're looking at. And like we said, A&R is still finalizing where that line of the corridor is and whether you're barely in it or barely out of it type of thing, Lynn. And it's based upon when they're drawing it, a lot of times they can't tell. They're not there, they're working on maps. And it's very easy to start drawing up a hill and putting a house that is up on the bank, if you will, and as opposed to staying down more on the level area where the river normally migrates back and forth. Any other? Yes.
Got a lot to say now.
Oh, okay, there you go. Please, please.
So who was doing the actual mapping of the river corridor?
Am I allowed?
Go.
They hired a river scientist. He actually lives in town, and it's boots on the ground. So that it's not just a computer program where they go 20 feet either side or whatever, which is in some, they've used computer models in the past. This is actually physically going and looking at the LiDAR, looking at the river itself. I know, sounds
Okay.
like something amazing, but and the same thing happened with the updated FEMA maps. They actually came and went in the river. When we just did the modeling, they actually came and were in Cooper and in the Lamoille and did drone flights. We have updated maps coming for all these different pieces because they're doing that here. It just hasn't hit the state's actual mapping. But once they're done with the river corridors, they will get uploaded to the sites.
So
You don't
is
have-
that after they've been approved by the town? So at that point, it's too late for anybody to make changes?
No, they don't have a process in place for when it happens. What I can do is similar to what I did this time, make certain people who are impacted know. I mean, I literally went through the map and
I
picked
know.
out every person.
Sorry.
And I will do the same when I get the draft.
So the draft isn't gonna be online for people, like right now, you can go to the.
I can ask
overlay.
them to put the draft online. I can also send out letters. I will do whatever we need to do to get this information to everyone.
So are they using elevation?
They are.
So how are our maps so inaccurate? I'm just gonna speak to this area
Yeah,
here.
I know.
Because as
This
you
area
know,
is
it
really-
impacts 100% of our property, other than the little corner.
I know.
So
We-
that started this. So this whole road, other than this building, is impacted, but it's at the
Understood.
same level.
They didn't look at the fact that it was a channelized with banks, etc., and that the river isn't going to move. It's been highly channelized. It's got both sides, as we all know. The river isn't going to move. It's trying to. It's doing it at Brush Street, where there isn't the same channelization. They don't have the same walls. They know that it's highly channelized, and they are going to be taking that into account. That wasn't taken into account when they did the initial draws for the entire state. They went through, they did the entire state. And now they're improving them. I can ask them to put the draft online and make certain people know that it's available, and I can make certain that those who change are aware of it.
So
that
is
you
that
can-
A&R map or
It's
local
A&R
town
map.
maps? Okay.
It's an A&R map being done by someone who happens to be local, and that helped us get to the top of the line.
Right.
But to pick up what Kristen said was, this is exactly why we said we want to get in early on this. If we sat back and said, we're not going to do anything, the state would come through and eventually draw the lines. By having this interaction, for us to come in and have this overlay that we're proposing, has initiated all these conversations, including these people coming in. And we actually raised that comment when they came and presented it to us originally. We said, hey, this is great when you're upstream of Hardwick Village or downstream of Hardwick Village, and there's fields and forests and whatnot, and the river moves back and forth. And yours truly here pointed out, I said, but within Hardwick Village, we're not going to allow the river to move onto Main Street. And if it does, we're going to put the river back into this box. So the river corridor has to be drawn into our box, our culvert, our granite walled sluiceway. I said, that is not a natural river, that is a sluiceway. And we have, you are not saying you're going to allow the river to eat the village. That is not going to happen. It's not, and they said, yes, that makes sense. But when they originally came through, like anything else, they're covering a long area, and you hire somebody, and they had certain rules, certain dimensions, and they just drew the lines, and they got Lynn's house, because Lynn's house is this close to the middle, and they were pretty much just running so far on either side, kind of looking at, what looks steep and not. But it was not as precise as it should be, and that's what we're getting right now. And they did say, because this obviously was an issue being raised by people who were looking at initially, they're going to look, they didn't call them villages, they called them population centers. They had a kind of weird, they said for population centers, what they think they're going to do is the river corridor will come along and they'll hit the population center of Hardwick Village and the population center of East Hardwick Village, and there won't be one perhaps. In other words, it will be upstream and downstream, but there will be no overlay in the population center. That's not set, but that would be one way to deal with this, because obviously we're going to allow it to move around near Hardwick Lake or something like that, and it migrates. We're not going to allow it to go 5 feet closer to Main Street. We're going to keep, if the wall collapses, we're going to put the wall back up. And the state is recognizing that now and trying to figure out a way with that. So some of the concerns in the village itself might go away. But once again, the why we got in early on this is because we were having meetings with the people who are working on it, and they heard us. And so hopefully we'll head these problems off before the rules are finalized.
There's a question on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, appreciate you. I was wondering, maybe you already said this, but what's the timeline for the new maps? Yeah, rough.
They're working on them right now. I've learned not to ask when things are going to be delivered because it takes them longer when they're a pain in the butt, which I do frequently. I'm guessing that they will be ready by next summer, but I don't know that for certain. They started work on them last year. But I've been banned from talking to this particular person because I keep adding more. So I will send emails if anyone else should be in not it sees an issue. But yeah.
Well, I don't want to keep taking up.
No, this is
So
what
I
the
don't
show's for.
disagree with this whole program, just to be clear with that. Obviously, we've had major flooding, we've had major damage and property loss. We had 20 properties that are currently still going through the FEMA buyout. It's major, money off our grand list. And I did a quick little lookup just on the properties that's impacted around my house. My one little block is over $7.4 million of properties that are affected. And you can't continue to tax people at these high rates and handcuff us and not be able to do things with our properties that we pay good money, to own. And we have a big lot in the village here. Yes, it's on the corner. That house has been there since 1902. There's never been a drop of water on that property. As we all know, the motel took the brunt of it.
Yeah.
It did back in 1973 when they did a lot of this river restoration. I don't understand why we are not doing more of that. We have an island of gravel, sitting in the middle of the river that has definitely broke the river in half. And yeah, we are going to have a problem here on West Church Street if that doesn't get changed, because when the river starts flowing heavily, it's coming right to Lynn's house, and it's going to start impacting that bank. We all understand erosion. But at some point, we got to start putting all the weight on environmental and start protecting property owners as well, and doing something that will help both. We have to live in harmony with our environment.
as an aside, one of the, some of the studies are, they're looking for projects to address the idea of flood storage. In the area where the in by the river was, if you go back historically, that was a mill pond. You know, there was a dam basically just downstream, and I think there was actually a gymnasium on the side. Yeah, exactly. And people would walk across the dam and everything, but that was a pond, you know. So this is the case of not having these regs in. In other words, when the dam came out and went down, somebody said, oh, well, great place to put a nice building, you know, where it was, no, that belongs to the river, you know, type of a thing. But they're looking at that area by the river specifically to address the idea as to lower they call it flood benching and stuff. They're different ideas, but basically to hold the water there. Basically, during a flood, it would naturally pond back up, the idea, and be contained onto the land. And then smoothly and effectively move down through our culvert, you know, our granite sluiceway, all the way to Cottage Street Bridge. And then down there, the idea is they're looking also on the side of that to lower it and put another flood storage area. Allow it to come up and flood out, which it did in 23, as we know. We had sand dunes there for a while. And store it, and that would help hold the water controlled so as it moves down by Hardwick Lake and across under 15, the bridge there, and hopefully hold the water back up. So that's exactly what you're talking about. It's not just what we're doing there, but it's also designing these flood control, if you want to think of it, programs, so that when things do flood in the forested areas, the low-lying areas, they get inundated and the water stays there, and the sediment also gets trapped up in there. And then effectively can be moved down through our villages. And then the whole idea is the problem with the flood is not the water, it's how fast it hits you. So the more you can hold it upstream, another example would be in East Hardwick, upstream from our bridge, that's a constriction. But the fields up there in both floods, they were holding a lot of water back out of, that wasn't coming down into Hardwick Village, because it was sitting up and completely underwater on even the high banks. My property goes down there, and I'm 6-7 feet up above where the river normally is. Yeah, well, it was a couple feet up and over, and I had sand up and over there. It was, you know, it's all cedar anyways. But that whole area was a pond holding that water because it had to go through that constriction, which is the bridge, and only so much water can go through. Now, it was interesting because that rectangle under the bridge was almost full, and it was very exciting to look at. But that is a kind of a natural control right now. Unfortunately, David O'Brien, being on the wrong side of that, suffered with his garage and whatnot down there. So the idea of having those, like you said, it would help with our flooding issues, because the more you can hold the water up and release it longer over time, the less impact it has. Right now, the Lamoille is known as a flashy river. We get a thunderstorm, the river pops up, roars by, and then a couple hours later, it's down again. It's much better to have it rise slowly, be higher longer, and then go down slowly, you know, type of thing. So.
Is there any management happening with Hardwick Lake? I mean, that's a big open area.
It's being studied.
Waterway.
It's being studied right now. There is a task force looking at the effect.
And one of the proposals would be, if it were removed, would be to dredge the channel as well. That's a two-part. So if the final assessment says removal is the best approach, it's combined with dredging.
With lowering that riverbank.
Yeah, dredging the channel
Right,
because of
yeah.
the sediment.
And it's
But-
like, you have to, and this is the reason they have the professions. They'll look at it and they'll say, yes, you can do all that, and that will gain you 15 minutes, because it's too small. Or they'll say, no, it will have a significant impact in control. So those are where the engineering, the hydrology come in, so you'll know if it's worthwhile doing. One of the things, though, the state is now, I'm sorry, go ahead, on the Zoom, can
I
you?
was just going to ask, this is Leslie Michaud in East Hardwick. I was just going to ask about what is the general opinion on dredging? I mean, in the state and, in the low-lying town, such as Hardwick, it sounds like there's talk about that. What is the general opinion?
The problem, the classic, I would say from 50 years ago and more, of going out and dredge the river and treat your river like a drainage ditch, is it does move the water faster. Unfortunately, the faster the water, the more it erodes. And then if you dredge a portion that's a problem for you, what you've done downstream is punch them in the gut, because that water moves faster through the part you dredged, and then maximizes or increases greatly the impact downstream where you're no longer dredging. Plus, there's then they also, same argument of straightening the river. Well, water runs faster when it's straight. It also cuts down deeper when it does that. So they've tried to control flooding by engineering rivers like drainage ditches, and they found out that was exactly the wrong thing to do. The best thing to do is to allow the river to meander, because obviously if it's a longer race course, it has to go back and forth and back and forth. It is backed up and it has more time to spread over the floodplain, which is why the floodplain's there, and park the water, if you will, on the side. And even in the main channel, it takes the water longer to come off the higher elevation if it's meandering, because it's a longer path. So that gives more time for the water downstream to drain away before the higher elevation water rolls through. So the idea is not to move your water faster, but to slow it down and to try to park it out onto your floodplain in very shallow, non-erosive type of natural occurrence. If you remember your school of the Nile River Valley, they love to have the flood, it fertilize their ground and all that. It's the same concept. To work with the river, not against it. And all the straighten it and dredge it, and right in front of your property might help if you're going down to bedrock, so it can't go any farther. But all you're doing is making it much, much worse. And if everybody did it, you're going to be impacted by the people who dredge upstream of you. Yeah, Kristen?
What about, thank you for that. What about removal of debris and structures and logs? What is being done there? Because that's a big impact.
Yeah, that's the question on the debris. The debris for a healthy river, you're having logs in it. It creates pools. If you're not eroding down in the village of Hardwick, basically the river has gone down to bedrock. It's not going any deeper. But other places it can scour down, and that makes a incised channel. Your wetlands on the side, which support habitat, dry up, and then you get steep banks that slough in, and you get more sediment and erosion in it. So that having a woody debris not in a village, but in the natural river, it's nice because it creates eddies and turbulence, and it will scour down for nice pools, which basically acts as another storage area. It's great for fishing because it's got nice habitat, especially in August when the river is lower. It gives you thermal protection. And it also will tend to help your river meander and have some side channels perhaps, so that when the flooding comes up, not all the water's in the main channel. It will actually start moving down some of the side channels and out into the floodplain and such. So unless you're in the village center, now the idea of our sluiceway, which is granite lined, walls, vertical, the fact that we have a lot of debris, old blocks and boulders from failed walls in it, that actually would help to move that, because the water would move through the village faster. You would have less turbulence, something called laminar flow, which is basically flow in a straight line, as opposed to churning and tumbling. If the water's churning and tumbling, it's taking much longer to get through the village, and it is doing more damage on the walls. Actually, if it's perfect, the water flowing along the sides of the walls isn't actually moving that fast, or on the bottom isn't moving that fast. It's moving slower. The fast water is in away from the sides and up from the bottom, and that body of water is moving much faster and smoother through the village, and it's actually not doing damage or erosion. So the smoother the water, more laminar flow it's called, through the village, the better, because it takes it from the upstream side of the village to the downstream side faster, and therefore it's less likely to come out of our culvert.
So my name is Karen Collier. I'm going to kind of piggyback on Leslie and Brenda's statements. We have been concerned for years about the reason why they don't go in and dredge the rivers more. There's a few of us that were in Hardwick in the late 70s, early 80s, and more particularly mid-70s, late 70s, when we used to have lots of ice jams. Wolcott Street would get blocked off, people would get brought to school in bucket loaders. It was a regular occurrence. I believe, and I may be off with dates, but I believe the winter of 79-80, we had a very major ice jam and closed Wolcott Street down for days. And after that spring, the Army Corps of Engineers came in. They dredged the river. They put the brim on our side of the river on Wolcott Street. That bank was never there. They built that up. Up by the old motel, they put in great big granite blocks set up high in the river to break up the ice blocks as they were coming down the river. Hardwick existed for between 20 and 25 years without any major flooding because of that, because of the dredging, because of the granite blocks. We were fine. Of course, with every storm that came down through, sediment came in, filled in the dredging that they had done. I will never be convinced by anybody who hasn't lived on the river long enough to see what it can do, that dredging a river every so often doesn't pay, doesn't work. Brenda's right. The sediment that's sitting up in the river, up above the old motel, is horrendous. That should have been taken out and given back to Walden for their roads, because that's where it all came from. Deb Messier said, "Can we have our gravel back?" I mean, she's right. Like, we should have been taking it out of that river and allowed that river to flow the way it was originally intended to flow, the way it was supposed to. If we keep leaving the sediment in the rivers and allowing it to naturally change its course, you are going to lose Brenda's house, and you are going to lose half of Hardwick. We cannot allow that to happen. I agree with Brenda. We have businesses, we have people that live there. I live in the floodplain. I know it. But I bought my house knowing that. But Brenda didn't. And I bought my house at a time when that house had not flooded in 20 some odd years. So we thought the problem was fixed, even though it was still technically in the floodplain. We hadn't had a flood in years. So I don't know, obviously this is probably not the time to have this kind of conversation, but anybody that wants to sit here and tell me that dredging is not the answer, I will have a serious conversation, because I've lived on that river, lived in this town my whole life. And I beg to differ. I've got proof that it does.
And I'm gonna add on to yours, and I don't think there's anybody that I have ever talked to when they're talking about dredging is to make this water scoop, just clear it out and there's nothing. I think what everybody is referring to is cleaning out all the sediment, the trees, and I do understand naturally some trees need to be there, but then strategically placing these water slow downs, big boulders, granite blocks, whatever, to slow that flow. You know, other than the villages, like you're saying, it's safer for the village to have a clean water slope, basically, and then, you know, Hardwick Lake or other fields where the water can flow to and not take out an entire village. But, I mean, I don't think even what Karen's saying, she's not saying clean out the entire river and send our problems downriver.
Right,
I've never spoke to somebody that's what they meant.
And I think, to your point, is what you're seeing is the result of the erosion upstream that obviously got deposited. And part of the concept right now is to, like you said, take a look at an area and see if it was natural, or is this the after effect of the accident got dumped there. But for instance, one of the areas, like I said, they're looking at a project, and all these have to be coordinated, because what you do upstream and downstream, obviously, because it's one animal, you know, the river. But one of the arguments right there is actually to look at the area where the in by the river was, and the rough proposal is to go through and lower not only that area, the deposit of the gravel that was dumped, but also to go onto the bank and lower the bank, because the bank itself, which the inn used to sit on, was actually infill to that pond. So that is one concept, to bring that down closer to river level, so therefore when it comes down and the river is carrying sediments, as it will in the flood, because we're not going to make it perfect, it would kick up, and then the sediment would flow into, with the water, onto that surface again, and it would trap the sediment there. So the problem, which would be the classic of after Irene, would be the perfect one, in Waterbury, where everybody was going and said, we have to go in, and a lot of people went in, and the state stood back and said, go ahead, and they went through and they did a lot of dredging of the material, but it wasn't coordinated. It was basically just dig it out and straighten it out, you know, type of a thing. And they found that caused more damage and problem. And so
the Army Corps of Engineers plan lasted 25 years.
And that's what we're,
got knowledgeable.
and the nice thing is,
I think the proposals that are out there right now are that kind of coordinated, like scientifically engineered things that include some dredging, some floodplain restoration, some changing of the constrictions, so that it's all carefully coordinated, like you said. And so, yeah, I think it's going to be an option that we'll, as a town, have to look at. Not the indiscriminate dredging that some people think people are talking about, but really carefully designed, you know, scientifically planned out programs that are going to, if they work, will do wonders.
Some debris removal already at 3 separate locations.
Yeah.
Obviously, it is what it is, but
Yeah.
it has been done, and it's a long process. And
Right.
we all
So
know
it's not
how
that
the
we're
state
for or
works,
against
but-
it or something, I'm not.
Right, it's
It's-
just a long process
It's how to
for
really
everyone.
carefully make plans
Yes,
for people who.
but it
who are
has
far better.
been started.
Right, and I think this is good because knowledge, but one of the other side is, and this is where we were saying, is it's kind of out of our hands. The state
Yes.
controls the rivers. All waters belong to the state, and they pass that. So even if Hardwick, every one of us said, that's what we should do, the state would say, yeah, slow your roll. We have something to say about that. But that is the discussion of going on and basically working on projects to make it less likely to flood, and when we do flood, to be less so. Just another side which has come up, which had occurred to people, is in the past, beavers were bad, get rid of all the beavers, they cause all this damage. Now they're doing studies where they're saying, you know, beaver dams up on all the little tiny creeks and all the little ponds and all
Why don't we
this.
take more questions about the
River corridor?
overlay?
But
Yeah,
anyways, so the point is, the state is also looking at many things to help keep the water out of our
Yes.
main river. So it has to be a holistic approach and with many different things, so, yeah. So, river corridor is one of the things we're
River,
doing.
yes,
Yes.
other question.
I have a question, it's sort of different look, and that is, how does this, for people in the river corridor, how's that going to affect their insurance? Like, are they going to be required to have flood insurance and things like that?
No. Right now, if you're in the river corridor, you're already in the FEMA flood zones.
No, it's not.
You're not, oh, I'm being corrected. See, this is why I always look to my left before I can finish a sentence.
If you received a letter, that means you are not in the floodplain. You are
Okay.
just in the river corridor. If you are just in the river corridor and you are not in the mapped FEMA floodplain, it does not impact your insurance at this point. I can't speak to insurance. What insurance goes by is the mapped FEMA,
The FEMA map.
the FEMA maps.
That's-
This is a map coming from the state of Vermont at the state of Vermont's work. It is not a national, part of the National Flood Insurance Program.
Thank you.
Yeah, so if you have a mortgage and you're in the floodplain, you have to carry flood insurance. If you have a mortgage and you're in the river corridor, you don't have to carry insurance for that aspect.
Okay.
And if you're in both, I just automatically assume you're going to be under the floodplain rules, and that's the higher set of rules, so.
And quite frankly, unless your bank requires you to have the flood insurance, you're not required to have it. The beauty of it is, if you're in there, you qualify for it, which is the federal point. The problem many people run into is not being in the mapped out flood zone, but then they get flooded and they didn't have flood insurance. And if you buy flood insurance on the open market, it's very expensive. So it's actually good if your property is already in there. You want to be included in there because you can get discounted federal flood insurance. That's what the program's for.
There will be a whole class on flood insurance this winter. So look for it if you're interested.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
Excuse me, sorry, when is that class?
We don't have a date yet. We're trying to put together a panel, but we're estimating in March. It will be put out on the town's website and on Front Porch Forum.
That's great, thank you.
You're welcome.
So, a lot of information coming at you very quickly. Any other questions? Like we said, a lot of it we don't have control over.
Well, I'd just like to make one more comment.
Sure.
Whether the river corridor easement in this river corridor Act 121, is that
121.
121? Yes. Whether they're the same or not, anytime the government puts regulations on a property, it 100% decreases the value. So let's not pretend it doesn't, because it does. Even if it doesn't decrease the value of the property itself, it adds an additional expense to property owners, whether that's permitting, you're talking possibly state permits, town permits, and they have the right to say yes or no. Just because you apply to a permit doesn't mean you're gonna get it. And like I said before, now we're handcuffing your cash flow, really. And you're expecting all of us to pay this giant tax bill and not be able to do what we want to do in good faith to our property.
And I think that is the point which the argument would be at the legislative level, in that much like when you talked about current use, you have a farm in Burlington, in downtown Burlington. Somebody who's come by and say, I'll give you $50 million for that piece of property because I want to develop it. You go, nope, I like raising my 5 chickens or whatever it is, and that's my current use. The whole idea of current use was to address that for agricultural purposes because of expansion. That same argument needs to be made on some of this, where if you have a piece of property that at one time might have had a value to be developed, but now can't be, it would have to have a current use. In other words, I'm restricted on what I can do here, therefore I should not be taxed at the same rate. But that is way out of ours. But that was exactly what happened with current use and sprawl, if you will. Go ahead, Kristen.
When I came here 10 years ago, the state said, oh goody, you should do river corridors. And I said, I don't want the extra work. It's not necessary. I kind of work with that attitude all the way through. I don't want extra work unless I see the benefit to the townspeople. This was brought to the Planning Commission because I see this coming to the town, whether we like it or not, from the state. If we have local control, I can set the rates for the permits. I can create how the permits are done. I can do the turnaround, or the town can. When I was in Greensboro, they brought in the lake shore permitting, and Greensboro decided to have local control and received it. I know they're still talking about that right now, but it's a lot easier to be able to work with someone at a local level who can say, okay, you can't do this, but you can do that. And that was the point for this. It was not to make another handcuff for people. It's to try to make the best of what I see coming. If as a town you're able to get the legislature to turn this back, that's great. It makes my life a lot easier. But right now, it appears to be coming by January 1st, 2027. And hopefully, either we'll have local control or we won't. But I'm hoping if we have local control, I can make it easier for people and not owners. That's the point for as far as I see this.
And likewise, when we were talking about where the corridor was, if they do exclude the population centers, most of your concern on your property, because it just won't exist.
Yeah.
The river corridor will be downstream of Hardwick Village, and it will be upstream of Hardwick Village, and Hardwick Village will just be zoned without a river corridor. It will just have its normal zoning. And that, the other suggestion was, they just narrow it down to where the state recognizes the river must stay. In other words, the river corridor would be in our culvert, and the walls of the culvert would be the river corridor, so that it wouldn't affect anybody's property directly.
You need to explain you need to say the river, not the culvert. calls the river the culvert.
In Hardwick it
Granite
is.
sluice.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Just
So when you
wanna
see
be
vertical,
within the city, the village limits, then you're safe, but if you're south of the bridge down where Heron is, then you're gonna run the gauntlet. If you're north of Four Linds, where the sluice ends, then you're gonna run the gauntlet, right?
Yeah.
So I gotta close, I don't wanna hold anybody up, I know that we've been taking this portion over here, has been taking quite a bit of it, but sounds to me like you said it's coming, this is being force-fed, it's the state, I get it, and you can talk about local control, it's gonna be limited, I understand. So that, in turn, becomes, you guys are our voice then, right?
Mhm.
So maybe you can mention concessions, because our property, you know, I'll say our property, right, we're a village, we're a town, we're individuals, we're owners. But if the state of the town comes in and says, you're gonna have a seawall, or you're gonna have large rocks that create turbulence and do this, I mean, isn't it natural, you know what I mean? So maybe somebody just says, well, maybe there's some concessions to be had. Because right now, I wish the sluice way went right around the corner and I'd be in the village limits. But the poor people down below, I feel bad because multiple businesses below the bridge or the fire, I mean, the devastation down there is terrible.
Yeah.
So again, I think I'm echoing and I'm just talking. There's a Bruins game on tonight, sorry. But I certainly want to make it help or work for everybody, but really it comes down like, it sounds like this is going to get adopted, so you're our voice.
Yep.
So I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And I think Kristen is careful, like working with those maps and getting
I'm
them
certain that she
to
is.
reconsider.
She's very diligent. I know her hands up, but it sounds like that's about a slam dunk.
I'm on the committee that's talking about this at the state level. They've been, and I've been really, really trying to bring a voice, the rural voice. I mean, I don't know what's gonna happen,
No,
but that's why I was like, it's time to, that and the money, like the fact that it would, adopting it would get us another, that's pretty big.
Yeah, and for the voice, Kristen's work on this, basically going all the way back to just our flood regulations and such, we are so far ahead of any other town that it's been recognized, and that's why she's been invited, and that's why, because of her hard work, we do have this direct voice. And like we said, they were hearing us when we said, you know, you can't let the river wander through Hardwick Village and eat it. They go, oh, no, of course not. So they heard us, like there's got to be some solution which will take away not all the problems related putting in a river corridor, but quite a few, because obviously your population centers called Hardwick Village and East Hardwick Village are where you have the greater impact. A farm field is less so, or a forest. Yeah.
Well, I don't think you should just take villages into consideration. I think you're doing it already, and I think you do a fabulous job. You know, I work with you on a regular basis here, but everything needs to be in consideration, people's homes and outbuildings and stuff. It can't just, we can't allow rivers just meander over someone's property just because they're not in the village. You know, it has to be in consideration, creating the entire map of the state, which we only have control here. But like he said, we're not in that shoes, you know, we're outside of that. And we do have a sharp corner coming around, and I look at the map and I get it, but if somebody allows a river to meander that far and take out that many properties, there's a lot of people not doing their jobs.
We're in the market to buy some granite.
So may I make an announcement? I'm going to preempt the governor. We did get $250,000 to do the scoping study for the downtown, from where you guys are down to Cottage Street, to do the 60% of the engineering as a phased approach, so that anything we put in, repairing the walls and doing mitigation, and anything we do would be based so that we don't do one piece up by you guys and impact Lynn's Diner, Lynn's Restaurant.
Yeah.
And that, so it's a phased approach. We just received the $250,000 for it. And that's going to be, we're going to be putting that out to bid and bringing in a river scientist and water resources engineers to work on that section. So that would include where you guys are, where you are, Norma, where you are, so that's a lot of pieces. And at the same time, we just got a grant to do some of the work down by Wolcott Street to help improve Lamoille Valley, Ford, etc. So we're in process. We started behind because we didn't have anything ready to go. And we've hit the ground running, and we're starting to see it. It's a marathon now. And I'll shut up because you have a Bruins game.
I used to ski a lot, and the snow is
Just to kind of bring it to a close, the Act 181, which basically made modification to Act 250 and changed the board, we had to go through and adjust the language and references to Act 250 in the bylaws, and they're noted if that is a concern. Yeah, Kristen will be happy to continue ongoing conversations about Act 250 modification. But thank you so much for your input. And this is also not a done deal. Like, even once it's in, anything gets tweaked.
You did.
Oh, public comments. Here we go. So, written. It's also just contacting Kristen directly with the conversation. What else we have? So basically the next steps would be just for a hearing. We're going to take what's being said here. Change anything that seems appropriate or comments. We basically were a study and recommendation. None of our decisions are permanent. We send our recommendations and our work to the select board. They look at it. They can change it as they want. They will have another hearing, and that would be kind of the final say to get your things. And then if there are no changes, they will vote, and then they will adopt the changes to a bylaws.
On the floor as an article or something?
Nope, it goes to the select board at a meeting just like this, except you're gonna have prettier people to look at, So, but it's pretty much the same process. But the select board has the final say. Thank you so much. Yes.
Okay, so river corridor easement.